What up, guys? Maxi here, and I'm bringing you Economics 10.5 Echo University. But in this episode, we're talking about the entire 10.5 patch rundown. So we're going to talk about the item changes, the nerfs, the buffs, the jungle stuff, anything that happens, we'll talk about it now. And on top of that, we're obviously going to get into Echo's builds, runes, Echo's patch rating, and all that stuff. So now we're doing the entire whole package. Let's get right into it.
Don't blink! All in! Just my style.
Alright guys, let's talk about the changes to buffs and nerfs for items and gameplay stuff for patch 10.5. First up, we have a Titanic Hydra buff where the damage is going to increase by 0.5% of your max HP. This obviously is a buff to bruisers and tanks that build Tiamat, so watch out for that. A bigger buff comes to Ravenous Hydra. The lifesteal goes from 12% to 18% and a 50 more radius on the active. This is a pretty big buff to a champion like Fiora, and obviously if we play Echo, Fiora is one of Echo's biggest counters, so we gotta watch out for that. Next up, Blade of the Ruined King is getting buffed for melee champions. The on-hit damage is going from 8% of the target's current health to 12%, which is a pretty big buff to melee champions. I don't see that many melee champions using Blade of the Ruined King, but maybe we'll see that now. Next up are nerfs to the support items, the Spell Thief and Spectral Sickle. Now the passive can only be procced if there's an ally nearby. This used to always be the case, but apparently Riot wanted to buff supports. But now they're, bringing it back. Next we have a much needed nerf to Moby Boots, although I don't think it's a good enough nerf. They're increasing the cost by 100. Right now mid lane, the best champions are literally just like Kiana Talon, build Moby Boots, run bot lane, and get a double kill. So hopefully laning comes back, but it's only 100 gold. Won't be that much impact. And they're also buffing boosts of Swifties in, I guess to combat Moby Boots. The movement speed is going up by 5. I guess this is good for someone like Hecarim, but I don't really see, and maybe Jhin, but I don't see 5 MS being that crazy because Moby Boots are still probably going to be the go-to. And lastly, for like the items and gameplay-wise stuff, turret plating gold is getting buffed from 120 to 160. So they're adding back 40 gold per tower plate, which they nerfed a while ago. But to counteract that, tower plates take 20% less damage from ranged champions. And the resistances stack by 10 per champion around the tower. So I guess they're bringing back 40 gold per plate, but they're making it tankier. Actually a benefit for melee champions because it's only for ranged champions, the 20% less damage. So ranged champions got nerfed and gold plating got buffed. So now let's talk about the buffs and nerfs to champions in patch 10.5. We'll talk about the important champions and we'll skip over the non-important ones. So the first important one is Ornn. Ornn is getting his brittle damage proc lowered by 2% of his max HP. And also, it takes him an extra level from level 12 to 13 to upgrade his master items. And then for allies, it goes from 13 to 14. So now, it'll take an extra level for him to start upgrading items, which is actually a pretty good nerf, but I still think Ornn is going to be one of the craziest tanks in the game. It doesn't really matter. He's still like 1v9 champion. You got to permaban this guy. Next up is Set. Set is getting his armor lowered a little bit, his base HP regen lowered a little bit, and his R slow lowered a little bit. Not pretty small nerfs to Set. I think Set's still gonna be good. Set's actually a good pick into Ornn, I guess, because he could just R you in. He could R the huge Ornn into the enemy team and do a lot of damage. But yeah, I think Set is pretty strong right now too. Ram has got a small nerf. Amumu got a small nerf for some reason. Blitzcrank got a small nerf, and Bard actually got a nerf. You know what? I wondered why Bard's getting nerfed, but then I realized Bard just AFK roam with Moby Boots and caused mad problems around the map. But anyway, those are the nerfs. Not that much. Probably Ornn is the biggest one and much deserved. Now let's talk about buffs. We got a lot here. Kayn is getting buffed. Kayn is getting more orbs in the early game. I don't know why they're buffing Kayn. He becomes a late game, mid and late game monster. I guess his early game is too weak. Not a lot of people play Kayn. Only one tricks play Kayn, but the one tricks are so good at him. Graves is getting buffed. Every time Graves is buffed, the meta does shift. So we got to watch out for that. His MR is going up per level, which is bad for Echo players because Graves will become a tank for MR for like magic damage too. His Q mana cost is going down and cooldown is going down also. So Every time Graves gets buffed, he becomes the king of the jungle, aka Tarzan. But anyway, Lissandra's getting a small buff. Nico's getting a pretty nice attack speed buff and some shield buff on her R. Is on and hit Nico gonna come back? I am not sure. We'll see. And the biggest buff here is to TF. TF's blue card ratio for like the AP ratio is going up 40% from 0.5 to 0.9, and his red card is going from 0.5 to 0.7. TF is already one of those annoying matchups for Echo where he builds Rod of Ages and becomes unkillable. Well, now he's gonna do 40% more damage. So we might have to watch out for TF players, because TF is also like a solo queue king where he just R's top or R's bot instantly, so we gotta watch out for that. Sibert's getting a tiny buff. Kai'Sa's getting a buff. I don't know why Kai'Sa's getting a buff. You know why Kai'Sa's getting a buff? Because Aphelios and Senna and MF run the show, so you gotta buff all the other 80 carries to make them relevant, even though they're already good. It's just Aphelios and Senna are just S tier. Alistar is getting a buff for his base HP, and then Sona's also getting a tiny little buff. But the interesting buffs come to the jungle. They are making Darius, Mordekaiser, and Poppy junglers. So Darius is going to do 175% of his passive damage to monsters. Mordekaiser's getting 3 to 44 more damage on his passive as he levels up. And then Poppy's Q max damage is going up by around 10 to 40 to non-champions. So she's going to do more damage to monsters. So they keep adding more and more champions to the jungle. And I don't know how I feel about this, because it's actually buffing the solo lane. It's buffing Darius, Mordekaiser, Poppy. They buffed Talon. They buffed all these other Zed. They're buffing all these champions for the jungle, but that also indirectly buffs their lane, because now they can actually steal camps a lot easier. So not sure what they're doing there, but hey, Season 10. Alright, so now let's get into the Echo part of this Economics 10.5 patch rundown. So first off, some Echo news. Echo is still being banned in North America around 35% of the games, where in EU it's like 25%. So other regions understand that Echo is not as OP, but in NA, 36% ban rate. Hey, NA, wake up. On top of that, Echo's also getting picked around 10 to 15%. So statistically, in NA, you have a 51% chance around where Echo is in the game or banned. So that's actually insane. That's a pretty high rate that you won't get Echo, and that sucks, but it is what it is. So let's get into Echo's best rune pages for this patch. We're going to talk about my favorite one, which is the Domination Inspiration. You're going to go Electrocute, Sudden Impact, Eyeball Collection, Ravenous Hunter, into Futures Market, and Time Warp Tonic. That's my favorite. Helps really good early game. Lets you get your items faster. If you're versing a matchup that you have to kill, like a Cassidy, I started doing Cheap Shot plus Biscuits and Time Warp Tonic. Gives you more sustained early game and more chances to jump on the enemy mid laner. And Cheap Shot is gives a lot more damage than Sudden Impact in the early game with your Q. So that's the first rune page, and the second rune page is the same thing, except instead of going Inspiration, you go Sorcery, Absolute Focus, Gathering Storm, pretty standard, and those are the two, biggest rune pages for Echo at the moment. Next up, we're going to talk about Echo's build. This build is pretty much the same. When you're playing Echo, you want to start out with Corrupting Potion, and then build a Doran's Ring and a Dark Seal. Then after that, you get your Proto Belt. You get your boots of choice. Usually, I go Sork boots, but if the enemy team has heavy CC, then go Merc Treads. Or if they have like a Yasuo or something, go Tabbies. And then after that, you go Lich Banes. And then after that, it's pretty much whatever you want. But I recommend going Death Cap for that instant burst and carry potential. But if you need to go defensive, Zhonya's isn't bad. Liandry's Torment is really good right now versus like tanks like Zac, Sion, Maokai, Ornn, all those champions. But yeah, core items on Echo: Protobelt, Boots, Lichbane. And after that, Liandry's, Death Cap, Void Staff, Zhonya's, all those are up to you depending on the game state. So that's the best build. And now let's talk about the must bans for Echo in patch 10.5. This list is like pretty impossible to make right now because there's so much broken things in the game, and Echo's counters are still, broken versus Echo. So like I would tell you to ban like, you know, Casted and Rise, Fiora, all those champions. But like you can't ban those champions because their pick rate is not as high. Right now I'm banning Ornn, Yuumi, Aphelios, you know, all those type of champions, Senna, because they're just 1v9ing games. Like everything is just OP. Everything is literally just OP. I would say just ban what is meta and what annoys you the most, because there's just so much things right now. So now let's finish off this video by talking about Echo's patch rating for patch 10.5. I'm going to give Echo an A for this patch in the jungle and mid lane. In the jungle, he did get nerfed. His passive got nerfed. His win rate actually dropped by 3%, but his ban rate still went up by 3%, which doesn't make any sense. Why are we banning Echo if Echo is losing more games? Who knows? I don't know. Hopefully Echo doesn't become one of those champions that just banned because why not? But anyway, for Echo in the mid lane, like I said, he's also A tier. There's not that many bad matchups right now in mid lane that are like our meta. Because right now the meta is pretty much just like roam bot lane with Moby Boots. And Echo doesn't do that bad versus those champions. Although they're very snowbally games. Which is why I'm saying Echo's A tier, because it's not really about mid lane. It's about everything that's around mid lane. Like a lot of mid lane are just roaming to bot lane, try to win bot lane in the game. And if your team ints an Aphelios or a Senna or an MF, or your top laner like ints to a set or something, and then the game just becomes uncarryable for Echo, because it is hard to kill like an Aphelios with a Yuumi or an Aphelios with a Senna or any of those combinations. That makes it really hard for Echo. Like I have a lot of games where I'm winning mid lane, but it feels like I'm weak because my champion isn't as good as like Aphelios 1v9. But then again, the entire League of Legends community thinks that Echo is the most broken champion in the game. So unlucky for us. But anyway, like I said, there's not that many counters right now that are meta. But if there is a counter, Echo struggles versus it. If there are no counters, well, then the enemy team has like an Aphelios. But for the most part, if the game has normal champions in it, then Echo is a solid A tier. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And I'll see you guys in the next one.